So, as we saw, the cost items as well as the cost curve will give us an idea in terms of production decisions. Now, we also saw that the firm has control over two important variables depending on the type of market in which the firm operates, that is either the quantity variable or the price variable. So, production decisions relate to both this price as well as quantity variable, because pricing is also a function of cost as well as the quantity that you are producing. In some commodities, you don't want to produce more and then bring the prices down, because excess supply will bring the prices down. In some commodities, the prices are very low, but you want to have large volumes of production and then you want to increase your revenues. So, production decisions then are intertwined in terms of quantity and price. So, analyzing production decisions then can be with a very simple concept called production function. Production function is the relationship between inputs and the maximum amount that can be produced in a given period of time with a given technology.
Okay, so those are fixed.
Yeah.
So your time is fixed and the technology
is fixed. The technology, we are assuming that the individual firm cannot vary it immediately, and they don't have the resources to invest in new technology, and so it's a long run decision, technology decision. Okay. And time, we have to have some definite interval of time. So, in a given period of time, with the given inputs that are available to you, what is the maximum output you can produce? Now, we can easily relate it to our earlier concepts of cost then, and this relationship is nothing, is in terms of quantity produced is a function of x1, x2, xk, where quantity is the level of output and this x1, x2 is the inputs that are used in production. In our earlier examples, x1 and x2 were capital and labor. It could be material, it could be energy. So, the initial production functions were y or q is a function of k and l. Then later on we expanded that production function to k, l, e, energy, then m came. So, now we use the standard CLEM.
I see.
KLEM production function.
Capital, labor,
energy and material. These are the major kind of a thing in a typical industry. Now, for simplicity, we consider two inputs, that is capital and labor. Yeah. And then we see a production function in terms of either the short run or in the long run. So, a short run is when at least one input remains unchanged. So, basically capital cannot be varied in the short run. In the long run, what we find is that everything can be varied. So, now we have short run production function, long run production function. So, why are we distinguishing this? We are distinguishing this because there are certain short run decisions that a firm would like to take and the long run decisions. This we can tie up with our earlier discussions about demand, for example. If we see that from our demand estimation, if we see that the demand is growing or is expected to grow in the next 5 years at this rate, then perhaps we can think of a long run decision of enhancing our capacity, having additional plans. So, two important kind of concepts, a short run production function and a long run production function. Now, here what we find is that, like in the cost concept, we again use the concept of marginal cost there, but here we use the concept of a marginal product. And a marginal product is nothing but what is the unit change in total product with a unit change in the variable input. And in our example, labor is the variable input. So, if I change labor,
if I hire one more person,
how much is that person
additional cement I can make
contributing to total output? And then there is an average product like an average cost, that is the change in quantity or the total quantity by the total inputs that are used. So, average, on an average, what is the factor
of cement produced by one person?
1%. These are very important kind of data to assess the efficiency of production.
In IT, we use building rate. That's whatever it is, the amount of money you can bill per person.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. Which means that if your marginal product of having one more person, if it is not going to increase, then I should think twice whether I should hire a person or not. Yeah. One. There is also an underlying assumption somewhere that your wages will be related to the marginal product. In some industries, there might not be a correlation, but generally, if your marginal product is very low, then of course your wages might not be very high, because you are not contributing to production that much. Then why should you be paid that much? Yeah. So these two concepts of marginal product and average product are very important in terms of production decisions of a firm. Now, again we draw parallels from the consumers or demand theory, that we find that when you increase your production, keeping one factor constant and varying the other factor, we find that the marginal product initially increases and then it starts to decrease, exactly like our utility of the consumer. And that is what we see here. That is, initially the total product is increasing and then it starts falling after a point. Now, that is because this MP curve, after an increase, then it starts falling. And then if you keep on expanding production, it becomes actually negative. Now, negative, I want to highlight that with an example here. Let us take agriculture production.
Okay.
I have 1 acre land. In this 1 acre land, 5 people is the optimum kind of workers that are required to produce paddy, rice cultivation. Now, so I thought that, okay, if I have one more person, I can actually increase. But please remember, this 1 acre land is fixed. So this 5, I increase to 6, slight increase in output. Then I increase to 7, slight increase in output, but not as much as I thought. That is this declining marginal product. If I keep on hiring like that, when it reaches 10, then actually the additional contribution that this guy or this person whom I am adding might become negative, because he might go and chit chat with others in the farm and then pull down everybody's productivity. 1. 2. In industries,
they don't have much work, right?
They don't have much work.
that much work.
In industries, in the earlier times, we used to worry about unionization and this kind of activities, because they think that if you increase this scale of operations beyond a point, there is a possibility that marginal product might become negative.
Right.
Now, this agriculture example is very important, because if you keep on adding people like that, their marginal product is less, and if their incomes are related to marginal product, then they will only have low incomes. Once when they have low incomes, they are in poverty. Then the question for any developing economy is that, can we pull this excess people out of agriculture? Because our land area is fixed. Too many people are dependent on agriculture. And that is because they don't have options outside. Yeah. So if we suck these people out of agriculture and deploy them elsewhere, perhaps
overall the marginal product will
go up and the economy's growth will be very high. And that is this whole theories of structural transformation. That is, if your production structure changes from agriculture to manufacturing to services and all, people might end up in higher productive activities, which means their incomes go up and overall economy also grows.
We are not talking about value addition still.
We are not talking about value additions. Yeah.
They are doing more productive work. At least they are doing more work.
Yeah. And we are equating that if they produce more, there is more value addition then. So it's a simplifying assumption that we are making there. Yeah. So very important then to understand this whole diminishing returns and locate your production according to that.
Okay.
So, if marginal product is greater than average product, then average product is rising. If marginal product is less than average product, then average product is falling, because marginal product is pulled down.
Correct.
Marginal product pulls down the average product.
Correct.
Now, if marginal product is equal to average product, then the average product is maximum at that point.
Right.
So, for a producer then, You have
has to operate at the average product.
at marginal product is equal to average product. After that, I should not keep hiring.
Similar to the other curve we saw, right? MC.
Similar to the cost curve.
Total cost curve.
Yeah.
When the marginal cost cross the total cost curve, that's the diminishing point. You should stop there.
Yeah. So, for a decision maker then, if I have this cost data and if I have this production data in front of me, I will make the decision where I should locate my production, where I should stop hiring. And that is where these variables become very, very important. So this is the point that we were talking, that there is this law of diminishing marginal returns. Yeah. So as additional units of variable inputs are combined with fixed input, then after some point additional output starts to diminish. We don't know when the diminishing will take place. So we have to keep watching and locating that, and that's the decision maker's challenge. And we are assuming that productivity is the same for every additional unit. If you have workers, some of these workers will have high productivity, and so that is where the decision making becomes very important. So then combining this cost curve and this production, we have 3 stages in production. So production functions, cost curve, we combine this. Then we have 3 stages of production. In stage 1, we have 0 units of variable inputs to where the average product is maximized, where AP is equal to MP, average product is equal to marginal. In stage 2, maximum AP, where MP, marginal product, is 0. And in stage 3, from there on, MP is equal to 0, and then it keeps falling. Let me put it in terms of a graph.
I think
that's easier.
difficult to understand.
Yeah. So in this example, we have total products here, a total product, and we have the stages here.
Yeah.
At this stage, maximum average product,
which is where the maximum average product.
Yeah, which is marginal product is equal to average product. Yeah. Stage 2, we find that, well, it is increasing, but the rate of increase is not very high. And in stage 3, it actually
becomes negative. Marginal has become negative.
And that is mapped here in terms of diminishing returns.
Right, correct.
Yeah. So stage 1,
the average product became equal to the marginal product.
Yeah.
It is the point. Then from that to 0, point, and then negative.
Yeah. So for a firm then, firm would like to operate either in stage 1 or stage 2. Stage 3, when it enters, it has to do some decision making to come back to this. So now what we are doing, we are using the cost curves and we are using the production function, and we can arrive at this decision as to where we should locate. Okay. So long run then, it's the same thing as what we talked now, but fixed cost is also variable in the long run. So everything is variable in the long run, but we should also see that the returns to scale, or we should be able to keep getting the economies of scale in the long run to locate yourself in this stage where you want to. Otherwise, you might enter into the trap of getting into stage 3. Now, this has very important implications in terms of certain firms. For example, mergers and acquisition decisions sometimes are related to some of these. If I am in stage 1, and if I can move to stage 2, then perhaps a merger might be easy for me. So a lot of this kind of takeover, amalgamation decisions and all are this kind of a trimming and right sizing of the firm, which is very important for the firm to operate at the efficient level.
Because presumably when you do mergers, the productivity per employee goes up.
Yeah.
Because some overhead costs are disappearing. Right?
Yeah, and also we have what we call as a synergic effect.
Synergy effects.
Yeah.
There are synergy effects, plus you get benefit of volume.
Oh yeah, benefit of volume.
So you remove some overheads.
Yeah.
And that overhead basically will then improve your productivity.
And that will give you economies of scale. So the expectation is that, but we also know from examples that some of the mergers have not really, for varieties of issues. Okay. Issues, So in the long run then, there are 3 possibilities. There is increasing returns to scale, that is output doubles, or the increase in output is much more than the increase in inputs. Yeah. So, a 2% increase in input might lead to 6% or 7% increase in output. Then there is the constant returns to scale, that is output can exactly double as the input. So, 2% increase in input will give me 2% increase in output.
That is constant return.
Constant returns to scale. And then the decreasing returns to scale, where the output actually increases less than the increase in input.
Yeah.
So,
I had one additional guy, but
yeah,
I have double the number of employees, but the amount of product that I am producing is
not doubling, it's less than that.
double.
Yeah. So, firms would like to generate this economies of scale, increasing returns to scale, and maximum they would like
operate at the constant return
to scale. So, now this is very important for a firm, because if you are already operating at the constant returns to scale, if you want to expand production, then you have to decide, should I start another plant or should I keep adding workers to this plant? Sometimes you can reap a little more from adding some more workers, but then beyond a point it does not.
Have diminishing returns.
So, then you start operating in another unit, So, you have fresh fixed costs, because I am buying a new machinery, land, everything for that, and So, very, very important in terms of, automakers already have one plant. Should I, so one plant in Chennai, should I have another plant in Pune?
Place,
And then Chennai and Pune, should they produce the identical kind of a products, or some products produced in Pune, it can be brought to Chennai, or so very important in terms of this kind of planning. Now, empirically, how will you estimate it? Very simple kind of a thing, concept, using what we call as a production function, and the simplest of that is Cobb-Douglas production function. Two economists called Cobb and Douglas came up with this production function. It is a very simple two input production function, that is there is output is a function of capital and labor, and depending on the coefficients of B and C, which we estimate in this production function, this is exponential production function, two input exponential production function. Depending on the values of that, we can locate where we are operating, whether it is increasing returns, constant returns, or decreasing. Now, I am not going to the technicalities of this further. This is just to show how we can estimate this.
I guess there, if you do log, it will become linear, right?
Log, if you convert to log, it becomes linear. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, statistical estimation, a couple of things we need to keep from our data point of view. One, we should also distinguish between the concepts of a stock and a flow here. That is, inputs are flow. It is not a stock, because material inputs keep coming in. Yeah. Now, capital is a stock.
Right. One time only.
One time only. So, we need to be very careful in distinguishing that. One. Second, most.
So, we have said flow is variable and stock is capital.
Stock is fixed kind of a thing.
Fixed cost. Fixed and variable cost.
Yeah. So, we need to distinguish between that when we look at the data. And second, most important input is labor in most of these industries that we are talking. And capital measurement is a very difficult thing, because to convert into money value of a machine is a very difficult job. Why? There is this replacement cost, there is this historical cost, which cost do you use, all that questions come. But we need to have some approximations of capital, and using that we will estimate the production functions, and so we need to be very careful in that. Then there are two kinds of data that are available. There is cross-sectional data and there is time series data over time and across. Now, what we showed
Cross-sectional is
snapshot. What we showed earlier in the context of cement industry with 14 firms is a cross-section. 14 firms for 2021.
Snapshot, one time.
One time period. Yeah. Time series will give us whether one firm, we saw Ultratech, if we have Ultratech's data for the last 15 years, we can see whether their efficiency has increased over time or not. So, basically both are important in terms of assessing efficiency. One, compared to firm A, how is firm B performing? If you want to know, you need cross-section analysis. Compared to firm A 15 years back and firm A now, if you want a comparison, you need to have a time series data. So, both are very important, and these are the two kinds of analysis that we do. Now, we can do this kind of data analysis for industries. From firms, we can aggregate to industries, and we can, there are studies that show production functions for the economy as a whole. aggregate economy, where the economy, so if you want to have cross-country comparisons, India versus some other country and things of that sort, then perhaps the output we will use GDP.
I see.
And input we will take
GDP is an aggregation of all the producers.
all the
entire produce of the country.
entire produce of a country.
Okay.
So the idea is to, or the point is that we can use it in micro analysis as well as in macro analysis, production functions with certain limitations. And we know for a macro analysis data, we get GDP data, Government of India publishes GDP data. At an industry level, if you want to do, there is this annual survey of industries, then there is CMI data that is available. And for labor data, we get the Labor Bureau, CMI surveys and all these things. So one can do this analysis at different levels.
Right.
Now, in decision making, as I keep repeating, it depends on how much the consumers want to buy. So given the demand, we can locate our production and plan our capacity. But one important point that I want to bring is basically it is used for capacity planning, because there is this very important issue in terms of capacity utilization for a firm.
Right, especially capital intensive firms.
Capital intensive firms. For example, I have already invested in huge capital. If I am not utilizing my capacity, well, my capital is underutilized.
So you measure that as a percentage typically, right?
Yes.
So you'll say it's 80% utilized.
Yeah.
So that's reasonably okay.
Yeah. So 20% is underutilized.
But still I would like to operate it at say 95.
95%.
But 80% I might still break even might be 75, 80.
Oh yeah. I'll be well off with that.
Yeah.
But still I would like to push
it.
But if I'm operating at 50% or then 50% is ideal capacity.
But if you're operating at 97, then you may say, oh, I'm too close to maximum capacity.
Yeah.
So this is dangerous.
Yeah.
So something breaks down, then I have a problem.
Yeah. So then at that point in time, I will start looking at another
plan.
Another plan.
But if I'm operating at 60, I'm losing money.
Yeah.
So then I will say this is a problem.
I
do something to build the capacity.
Either the demand for my product is not there, or there is something else.
Something wrong with my,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
capacity utilization, you're saying,
is very important concept using this. Yeah. Now for capacity utilization also we need accurate forecast of demand.
We need very good
Yeah.
yeah.
And there is a need for effective communication between the production and marketing functions of a firm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we want to highlight here is that our discussions in the first part in terms of a consumer and demand and all now merges with these discussions in the production part when we use this kind of decision making. Okay. Now let me just highlight a very important decision for a firm in a competitive market. Well, in a competitive market,
like FMCG.
FMCG and total revenue is very important for a firm. If your revenues are very less, then why should you operate? Now, there is also a concept of average revenue and there is also a concept of marginal revenue. That is, average revenue is nothing but your total revenue by the quantity that you are selling. Marginal revenue is what you are getting by the sale of an additional unit. So, in a competitive market, you cannot vary price because prices are given.
Prices are controlled by the market.
And cutthroat competition. I have no control over price.
Correct.
So when I sell more, my total revenue increases. My average revenue remains the same. My marginal revenue is also same. So here, my variable which I can vary is only the quantity. I can be at this level or this level and then keep quiet. So that's why competitive markets are very difficult to operate.
And if I change my quantity, it's not going to affect price because there are so many players.
There are other players in the market.
So my quantity effect will be only having a small impact on the amount of produce.
Total market. So, so this is an example where only quantity decision can be taken. Yeah. Now, let us see this a little more in terms of total revenue and then let us bring in total cost here.
Yeah.
Total cost is nothing but your average cost plus your marginal cost. Fixed cost plus your variable cost. Total revenue minus total cost is the profit.
Yeah.
Very simple. And then you have marginal revenue.
Which is constant.
Which is constant in a perfectly. But marginal cost keep varying.
Marginal cost will vary, yeah.
Because you are having additional workers if you want to expand. Now, depending on this variation in marginal cost, there will be variation in profit.
Correct.
Yeah. So, initially the profits will be actually high. Then it keeps falling and then it is negative.
Correct.
So, we should stop production at this point 0
Or slightly higher than that, yeah.
Higher than that is better.
Huh.
But as a supplier, we would like to get more and more profit. So we keep expanding. But if you keep pushing, you will enter into the negative thing in terms of profit, and you should locate production there and stop production. Now, so let me make it a little more clumsy with some cost curves. That is, we have this earlier cost curves, this average variable cost.
Right.
Then there is the average total cost that we saw, a U-shaped cost curve.
Yeah.
Marginal cost is a rising curve.
Yeah.
Now we saw price is given to us. We have no control over price.
Why did the average variable cost come down in the beginning here, in the beginning part? It should always be increasing, no?
Where is this part?
No, the average variable cost, this part of it.
This part. No, initially when the output is expanding, yeah, you have benefits of cost that is accruing. After that, after
kind of scale you're saying even for variable cost.
Yes. After that, it is increasing. Okay. That's why this is slightly a kind of not a perfect U like this.
When you have a labor for one, you cannot, labor again is in step function. You cannot have half a labor
or
something something like that. I understand. Yeah.
So then we have an equilibrium. That is, this is the point where the firm maximizes profits by producing quantities at which marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. Beyond this point, the firm should not produce. Less than this point, well, it can actually increase its production. So that is related to our capacity utilization question also. Very, very important analysis which we can have.
So in a very competitive market, you will try and make your marginal, you will go to that operating point where your marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost.
MR is equal to MC. Okay. Now, one more decision we want to highlight. Suppose you are operating in this market, and if your price is actually greater than the average total cost. Price is greater than the average total cost. Then firm will continue to make a profit, and then the firm will continue to produce. Suppose your price is actually less than the average variable cost.
But not more than the average total cost.
Total cost. At least the variable cost I can cover. That is labor and material.
You say you are losing money for some time, but
yeah. But your fixed cost you are not able to cover, nothing towards fixed cost.
Yeah.
So I might actually shut down temporarily.
Okay.
And if the price is actually less than the average variable cost, then I cannot continue production for a long time. For a short time I will see whether things improve. So there is a decision of shutting down. There is a decision of exiting.
So you can decide that if the price is between variable cost, average variable cost and average total cost, you can say that I will not serve the market for some time till the price improves. Right?
Yeah.
You have the choice. Because your capital is not going anywhere.
Yeah, you have already invested and you have kept there.
It's kept there.
Yeah.
You can wait for some time, and then when the price is becoming favorable, you again start your plan.
Yeah. But in a competitive market, if the price is greater than the average total cost, then the other firms will also start entering.
Correct.
Because there is a profit possibility. So that again pushes the price into the, But if the price is actually less than the average total cost, the firm exits. So there are three decisions now for a firm. For a new firm to enter, the entry decision. For an existing firm, when to shut down.
Temporary or permanent?
Permanent. It is in terms of this relation between price and the average total cost.
Serve the market at the cost, the average variable cost. Price point is set. Somebody like China comes in and starts setting the price point at their average variable cost.
Yes.
And you can't get your average variable cost to their level.
Yeah.
Then shut down.
Then you are hit.
But if your average variable cost is still okay, your price point is above your average variable cost, but you are not able to get your return on your fixed cost. Then at that point in time, you can say, okay, I'll wait for some time.
Some more time. So that's a temporary shutdown.
Shutdown.
Yeah. So
if you are operating above average total cost, then you are making money.
Yeah.
You can continue to operate.
Then you can continue. There is no. So this whole decision of firms then in terms of entry, exit and shutdown
is,
and also the decision in terms of how much quantity to produce, then is arrived by examining the cost as well as the production functions. And that is the empirical value of this analysis then.
And the data for all this is within the firm only. Mostly cost function. Because some of the material costs and all are coming from outside.
Yeah, but it's a firm level data.
Firm level data.
Yeah.
home level.
So, it is a microeconomic phenomenon.
Microeconomic phenomenon.
Yeah. Like an individual household allocating resources,
Allocating resources
a firm
to
will.
different
Yeah.
buying.
Now the pressure for the firm here is to actually bring down its cost and keep its cost at the lowest possible level. So, then now we have a fairly comprehensive story in terms of the supply side. The story in terms of supply side is in terms of one, cost functions, where the firm stands in terms of costs. Depending on that, the firm decides to locate its production. Equally important is the market conditions in which the firm operates.